really glad to be here with Cindy. I've done a few of these this election cycle so far with Cindy. I've done a number of these all told with a lot of different people. I was with JD Schulten not long ago. On my way out, I'm more than happy to do these kinds of things for good Democrats to make sure they either get reelected or get elected for the first time. You know, the good news for me is I don't see a lot of familiar faces. I see some. But since it's not my district, that's to be expected. Although I see that Brad Kading guy there, you know, looking at him, and he and I go back pretty far. Good to see you, Brad, and others. I'm not trying to marginalize anybody by not saying hi to you, but this is really, really great that Cindy has so many people on. And thanks to all of you who are on for the great support for Cindy and her reelection. I'm not going to talk too long. But I guess since I'm moderating, I feel like I'm back in my professor role again or something. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But don't expect too much from me on that front. I'm not going to be like controlling everything and all of that. But listen, you all know that we've got to get Cindy reelected. You all know that if we don't keep my seat, if we don't get Abby back, if we don't get Cindy back, then there's a real chance that we're going to lose the majority, and we simply cannot do that, folks. We've been doing great work, and Cindy will talk about a lot of that, no doubt, in her time while she's on tonight. And she's just done such fantastic work, being on the Ag Committee, being on other committees. She's just done a lot of great work for the state of Iowa in really not even 2 years. We knew she was going to be a great Congresswoman. But I didn't know how great she was going to be. I knew she was going to be great, but she's been fantastic. Partly because I'm getting older, but mostly because Cindy is such a ball of fire. I get tired when I'm with her. She's just got so much energy, you know. And usually it's in the cloakroom, and she's trying to convince me to vote with her on something, and she's trying to twist my arm, and verbally she does it and wears me down some of the time, but not all the time. And I have to put my foot down sometimes, say, okay, I just can't do that, you know. But she's just been absolutely fantastic. She's got a hell of a future in front of her here, I think, in the Congress or whatever else she may want to do down the road. But she's just does a fantastic job. She's relentless when it comes to fundraising. All of you know that. She never gives up on that. That is the main reason why I'm not doing this anymore, because I got tired of doing that after 7 terms in office. But Cindy is still new and fresh and full of all kinds of energy. She's great on the issues. She knows what it takes to represent a district that Donald Trump won by 3 or so percent, just like he won mine by 4%. She works with the other side of the aisle. It's all about getting things done for her district, for the state of Iowa, and for the country. And I couldn't be more proud of Cindy and all the great work she's done. All the more reason why I'm more than happy to do these kinds of things for Cindy. I hope it helps. You know, when you're on your way out, my wife and I talked about that, Terry and I talked about that a lot. I don't matter anymore. Nobody cares anymore. But hopefully a few people do care about my coming on for Cindy, and hopefully I got a few people here to help out. But thanks, everybody. I'm going to be doing the moderating, I guess. I will have some questions here to kick it off once Cindy does her thing. And I want to turn it over to Cindy now, if I could. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dave. I'm so glad you're here. And before we get started, can we just give Dave a big hands up, round of applause, thumbs up, whatever, for everything he's done for our state. Thank you, Dave. And truly, guys, I mean this when I say this. And Dave, I think you stayed in there till we got elected. You know, I know you did. He has put off his retirement, folks, that his wonderful wife, Terry, was hoping he would have with her earlier. And honestly, he did this for our state. And it's the only reason that he's leaving now is because he believes that Abby and I can continue to hold the seats and we can have some Democratic representation in the House of Representatives. And of course, we want to hopefully get Rita there and JD there, and hopefully Teresa as well on the Senate side.
That's right.
But I mean this, folks. This is a man who has literally dedicated his life to our state and stayed in here during the real tough part of the beginning. It's all been tough in the Trump administration, but on his own as, you know, the lone Democrat representing Iowa until he got some support and felt where he could walk away and leave this in a place where your voices would be represented with the values that you have. So thank you, Dave. I'm going to miss you. We love you. Thanks for all you've done for our state.
Thanks for saving me from being the only one, too. Thank you, son.
That's right. Yeah. Well, listen, I am so glad to be here amongst all these wonderful people. I could go on and on about everybody in these boxes, from Daryl, who always defends me on Facebook, to Cynthia and her husband, who are consistent supporters of mine, Brett and Rebecca. Brad, I got to hear the stories now about Brad, Dave. But,
no, you don't want to hear them.
I couldn't be more grateful. And we've got I want to point out a couple folks here who are on this before I continue, but Jill Shudak from the Council Bluffs area, who won a seat on the school board, ran for the first time. I think that was last year, Jill, was that? So she is a woman on the go in Council Bluffs, ready to make a difference and bring those democratic values to her position on the school board. And who knows what else is in her future. And then a very important race. And where'd you go, Jen? I just saw Jen Palant here on this call. Jen is running for a state house seat in the Council Bluffs area. Yes, Jen, where are you? Let's give Jen a shout out so everybody sees her. Where are you, Jen?
There she is.
I'm here.
Tell everybody just a real quick couple of statements about you.
Oh, well, I'm the daughter of 2 retired Iowa public school teachers, and my sister teaches in Council Bluffs now, and that's the main reason why I'm running. I'm just concerned about the direction that we're headed on education, and I want to help turn that around in the state of Iowa and flip the Iowa House so we can do it.
Well, there you go. So if y'all have some extra money, now remember, you got to give me first. Sorry, Jen, but yeah.
Yep. You first.
Please support Jen. You all know we need 4 seats to flip, and we can do this thing. So, and Jen would be a great addition. And as somebody who literally lives and breathes education, her family does, we couldn't be in more need of that. Yeah, right now. I know so many of you on this Zoom call with me can remember back to the days when Iowa was always #1 in the country with education. And unfortunately, our children don't have as much of that opportunity anymore. So we need more teachers who can represent us there. So it's good to have you here, Jen. There's so many people that I could thank, but just want to do a special shout out to my host, Council Member Matt Blake, Liz and Scott Brennan, Rebecca and Brett Dublinsky, my friend Beth Foley, who's on here, who lives in Chicago but grew up with me in West Des Moines, Sherry and Atul Gupta, Wendy Moshmiller, David and Lori Miles, Jerry and Mary Lou Nugent, Jill Shudak, Michael Mazowski, Naomi Eberly, and Stephen and Sally Jennings. Thank you so much. And I know the rest of you are doing everything you possibly can to support me. So all of you, thank you so much. Listen, we are down to the wire now, folks. We are 50 days out, essentially, from the election. Every single minute counts. And I know not one of us wants to wake up and see some of the results like we saw in 2016. And we'd like to see better results than what we saw in 2018 for Democrats. As proud as I am that Abby and I were able to flip seats and get out to Congress and make history, we still lost, obviously, the governorship and some key races that we needed to win. So this is our year, but we've got a lot to do. And of course, I think everyone can realize it's very difficult during these COVID times to get out and really, push the agenda that we have, our democratic values of helping everyone, of making sure that there's affordable quality health care, that we're protecting our rural fabric of life and our agriculture communities, that we're standing up for people with mental health issues, our teachers in particular, as well as they're dealing with this right now. All of these issues are so important, and we've got to make sure that we're doing every single thing we can in these last 50 days to support candidates like me and Jen and all of us running across Iowa so that we can represent you in the State House and out here in Washington. I'm grateful that you're here, and so many of you have been with me since literally the very beginning. Many of you since my primary, and I couldn't be more grateful. I mean this when I say this. I couldn't have won this election without all of you. You do not flip a seat in Iowa where you have, a seemingly, okay representative, as everybody thought David Young was. Nice guy kind of thing. Nice guy wasn't doing anything for us, but it's a hard seat to flip. He's not like a Steve King, where he's out there saying all these horrible things on a regular basis. But you all helped us make that happen. But keep in mind, that was with 7,700 votes. And we know that tally because it was one of the tightest races in the nation. I was one of, I think, maybe 2 or 3 that won with less than 50% of the vote. This is going to be another really tough race. We are trying very hard to do every single thing that we can to move the agenda forward and ensure that people come out and vote for me. My hope is that when they do that, they're going to go down ballot to Jen, they're going to go up ballot to Teresa and Joe, and we're going to have a sweep in Iowa. But this is not going to come easy, and we can't rest on our laurels until that time comes. We need every single thing that you all can possibly do, from contributing tonight, so thank you so much, to signing up for a volunteer shift to make phone calls, write postcards, or text people. Just even deciding that you're going to call your neighbors who you know might be on the fence. We need every single person to jump in head first and do every single thing that they can. I said last time that it was the most important election of our lifetimes, and sometimes I still think that it probably was. Had we not flipped the House, I shudder to think about where we would be as a country under this president, and how much we've done to ensure that we're protecting our republic and upholding our democracy. But this is the most important election now. I think we can all see that. The damage that this administration has caused with the support of the Republicans, and certainly bringing David Young back would only prove to support the Trump agenda. He brags about how much he supported Trump. He supported Trump more than any other person in office. He had a greater voting record with President Trump than Steve King did. This is who I'm up against, folks. And so I'm so glad you're here, because this is going to be another tough race. And this is a candidate that we cannot afford to send back to Washington. When I was here after our floods were, we got a little movement on the floods and got the funding to support that and started to get that piece in place. And we'd just come out of a government shutdown right before that. I remember sitting on the House floor and watching the votes go through, thinking, I'm going to take a minute just to see what this whole process is like, since I was literally running around for the last 2 months dealing with the flood. The minute if I took a vote, I was off the floor making a call to a mayor who needed some help. So I decided to take a little bit of time to sit on the floor and watch the process of a vote truly unfold through the whole thing. And I remember looking up at the board as the votes were being tallied. And I'm thinking, okay, from California, from California, from California, from New York, New York, Florida, New York, Florida, New York, Florida, California. And I said to myself, my goodness, if we're going to get what we need in Iowa, I've got to be the voice of 10 representatives to make sure that what we need is heard. And so I got busy with my fellow colleagues, Abby and Dave, and we worked as a team to bring so much home to our state, things that they couldn't get done, even in a full Republican administration, that you would think they could, like our biodiesel tax extender at the end of last year. And given the fact that this administration, with the help of the EPA, has done nothing but decimate agriculture in our state, it was so important to get that through, to create some market certainty for our farmers and people in our agriculture industry. And I remember coming home and then being on a flight with our Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Naig, in our state. And he said to me, yeah, I said, how about that biodiesel tax extender, Mike? And he said, I still have no idea how that got through. And right. And I literally slapped him on the shoulder because he was sitting next to me. My grandma came back at me. She used to do that to us, And I said, you're looking at it. Me, Abby Finkenauer, Dave Loebsack, we were relentless. We followed the speaker through the floor. There was never a day in the time where this needed to get through that we were literally not tracking her down and telling her what needed to be done, as well as the head of Ways and Means, who's responsible for these tax extenders. And then we worked with our colleagues like Sherry Bustos across the river in Illinois, who had issues, who needed to get this through too. And we understood that if we were working together, we were going to be able to bring this home. And our Democratic House leader was able to bring that home for us because of the hard work that we did, but because of also the support she has for our state to move agendas forward that help us, even against the attacks that this Trump administration is bringing there. So this is what we're up against, guys. We come in here, I start working with Dave and Abby. We're producing for Iowa. We're getting things that our Republican colleagues were in no way, shape, or form able to get, even in a divided Congress with a Republican president. And it's because we care. We care about you. We care about your families. We care about your parents who might be in our nursing homes right now, who are suffering because of the bad decisions being made as a result of COVID, and they're there alone. We care about your children and your grandchildren who are trying to figure out how they're going to manage this type of school that they're in, and their parents who are so concerned that they're going to fall behind, and they're scared about what that's going to do for their children. We care about those workers who are state government workers who are doing everything they possibly can to improve the lives of people in our state. Our public servants, like our police officers, firefighters, and teachers, we care about them. So we're fighting hard to get state and local funding in our next COVID bill as our states and our cities struggle to keep up with the revenues that they need to provide the services that you all need. So I'm anxious to get back here because we need to continue to stand up for our state and have somebody who is willing to go the extra mile, fight back against anybody. And I mean this, I don't care if it's our own party or if it's the Republicans. If it's not right for Iowa, they're going to hear it from me, and we're going to make sure that we make it right so the people in our state get what they need. So thank you for what you're doing. Please keep it up. Please keep it up over the next couple of months. This is so important. We have so much opportunity that we could be moving forward in this country if we continue to hold the Democratic House majority and get the presidency and the Senate, or at least one of those. We can move so much of our agenda forward to improve the lives of the people that you care about and improve the lives of the people around this country, improve our relationships with people around the world again, fix the issues that COVID has laid bare that we all know have been there for so long, those systemic underlying structural issues. So there is so much at stake. And I am willing to come out here again, use these sharp elbows, be a loud voice for what you need. And so I'm asking you to go out there, use your sharp elbows and your loud voices to make sure that I come back here so that I can represent all of you in a next term, and we can put ourselves on a path forward in this country once again. Thank you so much for being here. I know that we're so excited to have Pete Buttigieg join us in just a few moments, but until then, I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
All right. All right, Noah, I guess I'm going to take over now with the Q&A. All right, thank you. Thanks, Cindy, so much. Now you folks know what I'm talking about. Cindy's just so full of energy. And, our caucuses now, our Democratic caucuses are all virtual now, obviously. But when they weren't, when we were in person, Cindy is one of the bravest people in our caucus in terms of standing up to our leadership. If she believes that she has to do that to fight for her district and fight for Iowa. And I've witnessed that any number of times. There have been a few times when I think, oh, maybe I don't know if I would do that, but Cindy does it, and they respect her for it, because in this job you got to stand up for yourself. You got to stand up for the people you represent, because if you don't, nobody else is going to do it. That's the bottom line. I learned that fairly early on when we had the floods in Cedar Rapids and Iowa City and what have you. I had to stand up for my district and for the state of Iowa. Nancy Pelosi didn't like it very much at that point when she was Speaker of the House. But we had some differences on some things, but in the end, I got what I wanted. And that's what's been happening with you, Cindy, as well. So thank you. And I'm going to go, we've got some questions that were submitted earlier. And if it's okay with everyone, we may get to one or two of these before Pete comes on. But the first one's healthcare, Cindy. The question is, healthcare was a hugely important issue for your victory in 2018 and for other Democrats around the country. And with COVID-19 now dominating every aspect of our lives, it is once again crucial to every aspect of the 2020 campaign. So the question is, how is healthcare and COVID specifically factoring into your messaging and campaign this time around?
Folks, it's the same thing again. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to move the needle as far as we would like to with improving affordable quality healthcare for everybody in this country because we haven't had the support we needed. And so Americans and Iowans and third district constituents are still suffering as a result of that. It's been laid bare because of COVID. People have lost their jobs and they've lost their insurance and they're wondering how they're going to pay for the bills when they go into the hospital to deal with this. We've seen lack of access to telehealth, which has been so important to have during this time frame to keep people safe and healthy without having to go into a provider's office where they put themselves at risk. Also, we've had providers who had to close down, for a period of time, leaving those folks who needed the telehealth without options because we just didn't have those things in place. Since then, I've worked incredibly hard to move a telehealth bill through. I'm hoping that as we move out of COVID, we're going to be able to put that in policy for the long term and expand that across this country. I've been working hard to address the issues of rural healthcare in Iowa as we continue to see hospitals close. Reimbursement rates for many of our rural healthcare clinics as well as hospitals don't compare to the reimbursement rates in our larger urban hospitals who are owned by bigger entities, and they're struggling. But that's not to say that our urban hospitals are doing great either. They're under a lot of duress as a result of what's happening with COVID. So we still continue to see so many people who can't afford insurance, who are wondering how they're going to pay for their prescription drugs. We have seen the Republicans refuse to support H.R. 3, which was our big prescription drug bill that would lower the cost for prescription drugs for every single one of you on here, where we would finally pay no more than what any other country pays for the drugs that we actually use our taxpayer dollars to develop, research, develop, and produce here. So this is still everybody's number one concern. I am absolutely using it as a cornerstone for how I'm campaigning. David Young failed us before. He lied about his record, and he continually put Americans and folks in our district in danger, especially those with pre-existing conditions. He can't come back. He will be in full support of a Trump bill, to eliminate the ACA, and everybody would be left wondering how they're going to make sure that their families stay healthy.
That's great. Thanks, Cindy. And boy, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and that was quite an answer. You really covered a lot of territory. There are some things I do want to follow up on when it comes to rural issues. But you did mention the rural hospitals. We know that we have over 80 of those critical access hospitals. In fact, Cindy and I were just on a conference call this morning with the Hospital Association in Iowa, talking about these very issues. And that's just so important in telehealth. I'm so happy you're doing so much on telehealth. I talk to, as you do, a lot of healthcare providers in the state. I talked to some clinical oncologists today who were happy about what's happened with telehealth, making sure we get Medicare reimbursement for those sessions that they might have. And there's no question we're gonna have more telehealth going forward. There's just no question about that. And maybe one of the good things coming out of the COVID crisis is that we have in fact started to put more resources into that for the rural parts of America, including in Iowa. But that's just fantastic. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with your legislation there. Obviously, that's really, really important. I'll do whatever I can, as you know, in the Energy and Commerce Committee to push that forward. Tomorrow, we've got a subcommittee meeting where we've got all the FCC commissioners coming in. We're going to talk about the failures of the Trump administration on a number of fronts. It's going to be contentious with some of those commissioners. There's no question about that. But listen, if I could follow up on rural, because we've had this trade war with this president. He did come through recently at the last minute because he knows that he's in trouble in Iowa when it came to some of these waivers on the RFS. There are still outstanding applications for waivers, as you know, for the big oil companies, so they don't have to blend ethanol the way they should, according to the renewable fuel standard in the law. Where do you stand on some of those issues, and what are you doing on those? Because you're on the Ag Committee, you do a great job there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, and Dave and Abby and I have been fighting relentlessly to protect our ethanol industry and make sure that there was opportunity there as this administration continued to allow the Environmental Protection Agency to literally violate the law and give waivers to big fossil fuel companies at the expense of Iowa farmers. And let me say, when it's at the expense of Iowa farmers, it's at the expense of all of our families' opportunities. When agriculture is one of our top sectors, when it produces 25% of our GDP, when jobs are in Johnston at Corteva, when they're in John Deere over in Abby's district. I think is that Abby's or yours, Dave? Abby's, I think.
Yeah,
And when so many of the jobs that your family members and friends rely upon are related to the agriculture industry, we're all impacted when this administration does not live up to literally the law. And not only is it the right thing to do for the people in our state, we've got to stand up and hold government accountable for protecting the law and not trying to find ways around it to please who's ever sitting in the Oval Office and their people who put money in their pockets for their reelection. So we've got a long way to go when it comes to that. So we've been working on this issue. I've opened up an investigation into the EPA's issuance of these waivers. The GAO, Government Accountability Office, is on this. It's what helped us move. I think that the decision that the 10th Circuit Court granted that this is illegal. We can't have these. We can't continue to have these waivers. So we're going to continue to push on that. But what's happened in the meantime, folks, as Dave mentioned, we've had the trade war still going on. Phase 1 of the China agreement isn't giving us what we need. I'm glad, I'll be honest, we do need to make sure trade is fair for our country. And we did need to address the issues that China has put before us, in particular around intellectual property and all of the things of ours that they're stealing so that they can produce their own goods. But we can't do that at the expense of families needing to put food on their table, which this administration has done with our farm community. So we've lost 25% of our soybean market. Our corn is at an all-time low. We've lost billions of gallons when it comes to ethanol, which means millions of bushels of corn, and they're suffering. So I need to stay out here to continue to work on these issues, but to be out here on Agriculture Committee as we move towards starting to define what a new farm bill will look like in the next session. And that farm bill is very broad. It deals with things like food assistance, SNAP, for kids in our district that need the food. It deals with food in our schools for our children. It deals with, how we're just in general policies for the USDA. It is very broad, very impactful for this nation. And so I hope to be able to continue to be out here to stay on this because, Dave, I think we'll have greater opportunity to open up new markets for Iowa. I think from a domestic perspective, we've got ample opportunity there. Governor Loebsack and I have been talking with the Biden administration in hopes that he president about the policies around agriculture and trying to get things like, ethanol on a national scale, but also rural policy and support for our farming community. I'm glad to see that the Biden campaign is really open to hearing from us on a regular basis and putting those agendas forward.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm going to introduce Mayor Pete here in a second. He's on board. But I want to say I was talking to the pork producers today too in one of my virtual meetings. I told them that we don't know what's going to happen with this presidential election. But I do know this, that if Joe Biden becomes president, at a minimum, we're going to have far less chaos when it comes to trade than we've had with this president. We don't know from day to day where he stands on these issues. He wakes up and he feels a particular way and he says something, he tweets something, and I'm sure the Chinese are like, what the heck is going on now, right? We need some stability. There's no question about that. And I know Joe Biden will provide that. One other thing on the RFS, I did, look, I admit I'm taking a few more liberties than I used to now that I'm not running for re-election. And I did counsel a number of these ag groups not long ago. You know what? The president of the United States is the one who makes these decisions, not the EPA administrator. And if I were you, I'd tell the president, the vice president, which they did when Pence came in, when he went to Living History Farms, they said basically Iowa matters and you better put your money where your mouth is. And that's the main reason, I think why Donald Trump did what he did recently. Joni Ernst was not being listened to by the president. Finally, the corn growers and some others said, this is the deal. And I'm glad they did it. There's still a long ways to go. And a lot of damage was done prior to the president making the most recent announcement. And there's a lot that we still have to do. But thank you, Cindy, for all the tremendous pressure you've been putting on, the great work that you've been doing. That's wonderful. Now I'm going to turn it over to the fabulous Mayor Pete. I don't know where he is at the moment, but if he's at home, I hope he has that black Iowa license plate right behind him. No, I don't see it this time. What did you do with it? I put the pressure on him. That's good.
Right, I got
there it is. Iowa for Pete. Go ahead, Pete. It's all yours. Good to see you. Thanks, man.
Hey, it's great seeing you, Dave. Thanks so much for your continued leadership, and just so thankful for you and Terry and your friendship and everything you've done. And I can tell you're sprinting through the tape in this conference to make sure that everybody's well served. And Cindy, great to be with you again. Feels like a double header here, having spent time yesterday rallying the troops for phone banks, and I really admire what's going on in terms of figuring out how to virtualize the field side of the campaign, because in many ways that's actually the hardest one. Right. It's one thing to do press virtually. It's another one to do a fundraiser virtually like we're doing right now, which is so important. But it takes an awful lot of imagination to figure out how to do voter contact in new ways. And so it was very encouraging as we pull into these final vital less than 50 days to be part of that. And I just see so many faces here who were so kind to me and to Chasten during our time in Iowa. So thanks so much for your hospitality then and for your involvement now, because it's so important to all of us that we return Cindy Axne to Congress. So I think I'm not here for a monologue. Thanks, by the way, for bearing with me being late. I was on Fox News. They asked me to respond to Mike Pence, who was just on at the top of the hour. I thought, I can't pass that up. I got to get into the lion's den and make sure people hear a different perspective. But I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Well, you know what I'm going to do then? I'm going to go to the next question, and that's the importance of Midwestern voters and folks in the suburbs, how crucial that is, for Democratic constituencies and for Iowa and Iowa politics and nationally as well. I'll ask Cindy to comment on that, but Pete, you want to say a few things first of all?
Sure. Just in brief. Voters? I think this is proving to be so vital and better understood than back in 2016, when sometimes you had to do a little pushing to get the Midwest taken seriously certainly in our party. No one's making that mistake this time around. And what's so exciting, of course, is that working people, industrial workers, people of faith, military families, rural voters, people in agriculture, a lot of kinds of voters who may have voted Republican out of habit for generations are now looking around saying, okay, this far, but no further. Right. If we continue speaking to them as you and Cindy and other leaders in Iowa Democratic politics have a knack for doing. I think that vocabulary and that style, and frankly, just that tone that you all have, is going to serve us well in reaching out to those critical voters in Iowa and in other critical states. And just as importantly, I think it's going to be really important for governing, for effectively delivering on this program, this vision that we're going to have going into 2021 to get us out of this mess and set our country up for actual success in the decade ahead.
That's right. And Cindy, I'm going to call on you, but first I just do want to say, we talk about the suburban voters and how important that is, especially women and what have you, but along the Mississippi rivers, we have all these counties that have a lot of Democrats, at least they're registered Democrats, Lee County and Des Moines County, Muscatine, Clinton, Scott as well. And a number of them flipped last time, as we know, to Donald Trump. They were Obama supporters. I think Biden has a real opportunity to get a whole heck of a lot of those folks back. That's right. And I think Rita Hart has a great opportunity also to capture those folks. We got to speak to them where they live. And I think that's really, really important. I've tried to do that over the years, but I know that that's exactly what this presidential campaign is doing and Teresa's doing. And Cindy, if you want to speak to those issues as well as the suburban issues, whatever works for you. Okay, Cindy?
Yeah, so reaching out to suburban and rural, yes, absolutely. I think what we're seeing right now, and I'm talking from my perspective, but I also see this because Abby is one of my good friends and I talk to her quite a bit. And my other fellow colleagues who come from equally difficult seats like Kendra Horn in Oklahoma, Joe Cunningham in the Carolinas, all these folks who really have flipped seats that a lot of people thought we couldn't flip. We're out there changing the hearts and minds of the people in these rural areas. You know, Dave's a perfect example of that. The race right now for Rita Hart's really tight.
Mhm.
You know, Dave has won by massive margins. One would think, oh, well, you know, Dave won, you know, so we're, you know, I can't remember what you won by last time, Dave. And what
Oh,
was
12, 14, something like that. Yeah.
but the swing on that was what, 28? Because what did Trump win
It's
by?
quite a bit. Yeah. Trump won it by 4. So yeah. Mhm.
So, you know, people in Iowa will vote for the person if they know you're working hard for them. And so we've been out there making sure that folks understand the work that I've been doing. I'm on just this morning, just like I do every Wednesday morning. I got up and did my 7:30 a.m. KMA radio interview out of
Right.
Shenandoah, Iowa, that goes out to 8 counties. I do that every week, week in and week out. I talk to Raccoon River Valley Radio in Guthrie County on a monthly regular basis. Everywhere we go, when I'm out working with folks, whether we're dealing with education, economic development, hospitals, I invite the press, and we always push the information out there on the work that I've been doing for rural America. And I think that they're going to start going towards. And I got to tell you, I got to credit, you know, Pete. Thank you so much, first and foremost, for being here. And I think I'm going to have what do you call that when I don't see you so often, Mayor? Withdrawals, and because I've been seeing them a lot this week. But bringing the understanding of what it means to respect rural America and work hard for them is something that you were so eloquent with in your race. And we've got to go back and do exactly what the mayor did, what Dave has done for his whole career, what I'm doing, what Abby's doing, and other Democrats like us in tough seats, and get out there and and be with them. I've been named the most accessible freshman member of Congress because I held 57 town halls last year, more than any other freshman member. Well, than any other actual member of the House too. Sorry, Dave. And you know what? I will walk out of some of these tough to win areas that are all Republican, and some of those folks will vote for me. But the ones that don't, they come out, they say, you know what? I really respect that you're out there working hard for us. I might not support every single thing you do, but I appreciate what you're doing, and you're standing up for Iowa. That, folks, will translate to votes down the road. It will translate to others supporting the Democratic Party. So we got to continue to do that. And then I would just say on the suburban thing, you know, I'm the suburban mom. I fought for kids' education and for economic viability for our families for a long time. I think we've got a huge opportunity in Dallas County and to continue to get more support out in Polk County and our suburbs and other suburbs of places like Council Bluffs. But we're going to be hit with some tough messaging that they're going to try and push down people's throats that aren't true, that are scare tactics. And we've got to be really on top of that.
Great. You know, and you mentioned the rural radio that you go on. That's just so absolutely important. I think there's a rural radio station in Mount Pleasant. They would put my press releases out all the time. It was fantastic. I could never win Henry County, but I sure won the town of Mount Pleasant in the past. You know, a lot of these counties we're never going to win, but we can do well enough, and that can carry us over the finish line. You know, in the district as a whole. And KMA, that's fantastic. You may be the only one on some of these stations that is a Democrat. And it may be, you know, look, I mean, you know, we got farmers in the fields listening to the radio. We got folks out there with the radio on, and you may come on and they go, oh God, there she is again. What the heck, you know, who this Democrat, you know, from Des Moines. But then once in a while you're on, it may be the case that you say something that resonates with them. And it's like, well, wow, that one, she's kind of making some sense there on that one. You know, and that's important, just getting out there and, you know, being with your ideas and who you are and all that, just being exposed to those folks. And that rural radio is absolutely fantastic. And I'd like Pete to talk a little bit too about sort of this, you mentioned it, Pete, a little bit at the outset, field work campaigning in the age of COVID. But that's one of the questions, you know, that was asked ahead of time too. And Pete, if you could, do feel expansive. Don't worry about limiting yourself, Pete.
I'm wired this evening to try to speak in cable news sound bites. So I'm trying.
No, it's friendly here too. It's friendly here. All right.
I mean, look, again, you think about, I mean, in many ways, the thing we're seeing, I think, most naturally develop is actually candidates like Cindy, who are doing the same hard work in a new way. Right. If you just make a list of the things that you've probably done today, engaging with the press, raising money, firing up your supporters, hearing from advocates, thinking about policy. It's not the same to do those online, but there are ways to do it online. Fundraising, as we're doing this evening. And I should have started by just thanking everybody for contributing, especially because I know you're getting hit up in a lot of different ways right now, but it's so important. But it's comparatively clear how to do that online. But the voter contact, the social capital, especially if you're, if you're like me, some people are just natural in going out and knocking on the doors of strangers or picking up the phone, and calling strangers and talking to them about politics. And if you're one of those folks, more power to you. I'm an elected official and candidate, and I never felt comfortable doing that. I always drew a lot of kind of energy from being around other people doing the same thing, right? You go into the campaign office and there's a smell of coffee, and you're chatting with some of your neighbors, and you sit down and you take that packet and there's somebody to your right. We don't have that right now, right? So that's the part that I think takes a lot of originality and creativity. That and finding voters where they are and doing it safely. I was just on TV, they're asking me, why isn't Biden out there doing rallies in the same way that Trump is? Of course, the answer is because he respects the health of his supporters. But because we do that, we got to be really thoughtful. And when there's a way to do safe in-person campaigning, we're doing it. But when we're not too sure about that, we're moving it onto that over the phone or over the Zoom or whatever it's going to be space. And I'm really interested to see the campaigns that do the best job of this now, because I suspect if we go 1, 3, 5 years from now, we're not just going to pop back to how things were a couple of years ago. Some things will go back to the way they used to be, and some things will be different forever. And I'm really eager to see how we maybe shed some old habits that we were ready to lay aside anyway when it comes to campaigning. Of course, the one thing that never changes is that our job is to make sure more people vote for our candidate than the other candidate. And that's the bread and butter. Sometimes we get so sophisticated and convoluted in campaigning that we lose sight of how basic that is. And, again, the candidates are out there with the right message. We know that much. So then the question for the rest of us is what's it going to take to get them over that finish line? And right now, I think there's two kind of voters I'm worried about. Some of them are still figuring out whether they're going to pull the lever this way or that way. They're still deciding how to vote. Maybe because they always grew up Republican and they were so mad in 2018, they finally voted Democrat. But can they really do it in a presidential year? They're still thinking that over. Or maybe they're getting bombarded with all these messages. More money is going to come into the district, the ads, the mailers, and all that. And they really are thinking it over. And then you got the other group that's just deciding whether to vote at all. And that could actually be the group that makes the difference. And so making sure young people in particular hear the message, look, you think the system is not great? We're right there with you. You want to change it? Your moment of maximum power is the moment that you vote. And this is your best chance to do something about it. Go post on social media. Great. Go march in the streets. Good. That's making a big difference. But make sure that you vote, because that's the one action you can do that'll have the most power. And if we can just continue mustering that message and do it with the awareness that Election Day this time is not a day, is it? It's a season. And not only that, it may not, for some races, it may not end on November 3rd either, right? There may be a kind of second round fight to make sure all the ballots get counted, to make sure people trust the legitimacy of the races that we've won. With the president who's already come out and said, if I didn't win, it must have been rigged. After our Iowa experience, I know how it feels to want results on Election Day.
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
But look, I mean, that in this case, that could be if it takes 2-3 days more, that could be an indication of, people doing their job, carefully counting the ballots that came in. And we can't play into the hands of anybody who wants to attack the legitimacy of our elections.
Right.
So this is going to be an election season like none other, not only in terms of what's at stake, but just in terms of how it goes. And we got to be ready for all of that. But I can sense and see in the conversations that are happening, and frankly, probably because you all have, you know, the wild experiences of presidential politics romping through your state every 4 years. Iowa is one of the places where I'm seeing the most thought go into that, and I'm excited to continue to follow what you all develop in order to stay ahead of that, make sure everybody gets that chance to vote, and make sure that every voter deciding how to vote or deciding whether to vote gets no shortage of touches from our campaigns.
Well, thanks, Pete, and thanks, Cindy. We're getting near the end. I do want to make one comment about you know, what might happen on November 3rd and the days or possibly the weeks thereafter. The one thing I hope is that the media are not as impatient as they were on the night of the caucuses, because they were all expecting this thing, you know, to end on that night, and they were so angry at Iowa and Iowans. I think that they're prepared, you know, getting prepared for something that might take a little bit longer, but that's what we're going to need. We're going to need patience on the part of people because if the media, for example, are impatient, that's only going to feed into the narrative, you know, that Donald Trump is putting out there, that it's rigged and all the rest.
Right.
So, you know, hopefully that'll be the case. Now, we're getting near the end here. Pete, you gave some remarks that were almost like closing remarks, but I'm going to come back to you anyway there. Inspirational as always. There's kind of a lighthearted question here having to do with the steak fry, and you know, it was a virtual steak fry this year, drive-in and all that. I didn't get there because, you know, I'm not from Polk County, and I'm kind of keeping myself at home, trying to be safe and all that. But any comments you folks you both want to talk about and how that went, and any special moments in particular? Maybe embarrassing moments? I don't know. Go ahead, Pete, and then we'll go to Cindy.
Well, I tell you, you know, it's amazing to think it was a year ago that I was there for the steak fry, and I was able to do a video and participate virtually in this year's. But last year's, you know, I remember how that rain was just kind of starting to come our way, but we held out and we had this amazing energy. It was one of the moments I really knew that we were that we had a real shot at winning. And then you remember the little things, right? I remember the heat coming off that grill for sure.
Yeah, that was pretty
my
intense.
eyebrows. And I remember a guy in a dinosaur suit kind of joining our kind of parade there. I'll tell you one other thing I remember is just by chance, I was set to go on either just before or just after Joe Biden. And we were in that kind of pen, and I think it took a while for either of us to speak. So we just got to talking, and you know, that was a time when he was really struggling in the polls, and he could not have been more decent and more gracious and more kind.
Wow.
And thinking back on that, how he treated the people around, including his competitors, when he was in the back of the pack, when he was winning and beating the rest of us, and at any time in between, was always the same. It was always decent. It was always gracious. And it's one of the reasons why I'm backing him up, you know, not just because of what I'm up against, what I think America's up against with the Trump White House, but because I really am excited to see that kind of just decent human being back in the White House.
When he becomes president, we'll be able to breathe again, is the way I put it.
Exactly. Well said.
That's right. Cindy?
Yeah, well.
And maybe we'll have you wrap it up, Cindy. I think we're getting near the end here. That's okay.
Okay, I will. And because I don't want to follow Pete, that's never a place where you want to be.
Well,
so
you're stuck there right now.
And then he can say, so, you know, but so I just want to say, I just wrote this down as and Pete, you just said this too about our young people. Your moment of maximum power is the day you vote. I think that's such a strong statement. I'm going to be using that. I think there are way too many young people that don't believe that their vote counts. And as a mom of a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old who's now just off in Chicago going to college, I've talked to plenty of young people, his friends, who have told me, they say my vote doesn't make a difference. And then, you know, then they get stuck in my kitchen for 20 minutes while I talk to them about why it does. But I think what you just said just cuts right through it. There's not one young person that doesn't want to believe that they've got some power in how their life unfolds and what this world looks like for them. And if we allow them to understand that they do have power in a framework like you just mentioned, this could be a powerful way to get that message through to them. So thank you. I love how you said that. And I think we need to be telling our young people that if they skip that day of voting, they've lost that moment of the time where they had the maximum power in their lives. And
Exactly.
so wonderful, which is why I don't ever want to follow Pete Buttigieg. So thank you for that. Listen, the steak fry, I felt like I was in the movie The Cars, because I've seen that as the mom of two boys. So at the very end, I was like, rev your engines, let's win this. And I brought down, like, you know, a scarf for a flag, because it was a very surreal experience. And as Pete had said, we had 12,000 people the last year, and I was staring out at a field of, you know, 600-700 cars. Honking was then becoming, that's clapping. And it was very weird. But what I can, I'll tell you, the momentum was still there. The excitement when I got there, from the Polk County Democrats and everybody who'd arranged it, the excitement of the crowd, they were fired up on every statement that everybody made in their speeches. And I think it just goes to show that Democrats are going to try and do everything they possibly can to reach as many people as they can. And we're flexible, we're innovative, and we're not going to let something like a pandemic that this president has terribly controlled keep us from winning this election. And I think it really rang true that day.
Thank you. Thanks, Cindy. Noah, I'm just going to say a couple things. Is that all right at the end here? Just put your hand up if that's okay, Noah.
Of course. Go ahead.
You probably want to say some words when I'm done. But Pete, thanks for coming on, and I'm glad you got that license plate back there behind you. That was great. And Cindy and all of you folks, I really appreciate it. I just want to say one more thing, if I may. I'm on my way out. I got to take advantage of these opportunities, right? Nobody's going to listen to me after this. But you mentioned young people. What I have said to young people throughout these last couple of years, when not just young people, but a disproportionate number of people are just so turned off by our politics, and a part of why Donald Trump became president in the first place, quite honestly, too, that alienation factor. I say to these people, I worry about what is happening in this country, not to me, not as a member of Congress. No offense, Cindy, but members of Congress come and go. Yes, there have only been 12,000 or whatever, U.S. House of Representatives members over the history of this country. And so it's pretty cool to be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And we can never forget that. But I worry not just about the disrespect for individuals. What I worry about is the lack of respect and the lack of concern for our institutions of government. And beyond the institutions, our system of government, our very political system. As a former political science professor, I often talk about legitimacy. And what I worry about with the younger generation is that they are not going to see the system as legitimate, let alone Dave Loebsack or Cindy Axne or Pete Buttigieg. And when they begin to question the whole system, then I think we're in big trouble. And I think a lot of them do right now. And somehow we have to convince them that all is not lost, that there is hope and that we're listening to them. And hopefully they don't look at us as just another politician or other politicians. And Pete, I think, your youth was very important. When you were running, that was one of the things that attracted me to you. You have a wonderful husband too, by the way, and say hi to him, just like I have a wonderful wife, those folks are very important to us, politically as well. But I do worry about people losing faith in the legitimacy of the system. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of why Donald Trump came to office as well, and part of why we can't afford to have him for another 4 years. We simply can't. And with the folks in his party and the Congress who simply failed to stand up to him when they should be, for the sake of this. So I don't mean to end it, my part of it, on a downer, but I just think that's important to keep in mind. And Noah, I'll turn it back to you. And thank you for letting me do this, Noah. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who's on, and to all of you so much. Thanks.
We were very happy to have you moderate this discussion. Thank you again, Congressman Loebsack, for your years of service, for moderating this discussion. Mayor Buttigieg for hopping on so quickly after that interview. Thank you, of course, to Congresswoman Axne for the fight that you keep proving every day. And thank you to every single person on this Zoom. 48 days. You can count them, start counting them down whenever, but we are running out of time to make sure that we keep Congresswoman Axne in her seat, elect Rita Hart, re-elect Iowa House Blue, Jen Pellant, keep Jill Shudak, state and local candidates, the U.S. Senate, the White House, it all matters, and it is all on the ballot this November. So thank you for donating. If you can, please donate more. If you have some hours to give to phone bank or do any other sort of volunteering, we need it. So with that, I will let everyone enjoy their Wednesday evenings. But thank you again for all you do. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. But otherwise, let's look forward to a brighter future and a blue November. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Great seeing you all. Thank you.
Good to see y'all.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.